If you wake up in September, cold to the bone, and your fire's just an ember, down to the river we'll go. Where the spirit knows, where love can grow, where the energy flows, down to the river we'll go. If you find your fears undying, and you dream of yesterday, and your troubles aren't residing, down to the river we'll go. Where the spirit knows, where love can grow, where the energy flows, down to the river we'll go. And I will love you. I will feel your pain, and I will hold you too. Where the spirit knows, where love can grow, where the energy flows down. And I will love you. I will feel your pain, and I will hold you too. Where the spirit knows, where love can grow, where the energy flows, down to the river we'll go.
Do not fear! Saf is here, and I'm Saf Buxy from Saf Surgery. We are in total, and I mean total collaboration with Spiritually Gone Wild and Love Coach Academy. Saf Surgery supports his charity, Men's Mental Health Charity, and aspire to be a recovery community, a charity for people in addiction and recovery. And I'm the host of Inspirational People, Inspirational Stories. And the aim of this show is to interview inspiring people who have either been successful in their field or have inspired others in some form. And today's guest, hoo-ha! Today's guest, I call him the Cat Man. The Cat Man is Scott Catamas. Scott Catamas, if you don't know who he is, I don't know where you've been. He's an internationally acclaimed love coach, specializing in conscious connections, communication, and relationships. He has won, check this out, he has won multiple Emmy Awards as a writer, a producer of educational television, and he is the founder of one of the beautiful collaborations we have, Love Coach Academy. So Scott, where are you, my man? Where are you? Bring it on, Scott. Hey! Oh, how you doing, Scott? What's up?
Well, it's good to meet you. Thank you. I appreciate all the wonderful support you do. You know, you're kind of, you and Debbie Garcia are like twin twins separated at birth, you know, twin souls. The way you both are so wonderful about really bringing people out and helping to bring consciousness into our world. So thank you very much. It's nice to finally meet you. I've heard a lot about you. It's good to be on your show.
Oh, you know what? It's so great to have you, Scott. And I watch a lot of your stuff on Facebook and YouTube as well, the stuff that you've done in the history. And I've seen you when you had short hair. I see you when you had long hair. You know what? Funny enough, if you see my last episode, last week of TJ Woodward, I was growing my hair. And I have had hair your length before as well when I was at university, because I was a bit of a rocker, bit of a Motley Crue fan, if you like. And I wanted to be like Tommy Lee and Nikki Sixx, but hey, that never materialized. But I'm so happy to have you on the show, and so happy to hear what you've got to say. I think I mentioned earlier off air that I'm a COO of a men's mental health charity, and I think I mentioned that in the introduction. HIS, Men's Mental Health, and we're based in the UK, and we serve men who are suffering with anxiety, depression, or any kind of mental health, and try and prevent suicide. That's the main aim for what we do. And there's, I think we're one of the very few charities that actually do that in the UK, especially in the southeast. And I've heard you speak about the value of feelings for men, and I know we have a lot of guests who are watching today, or who will watch us at some stage, who would love to hear your take and your thoughts on the value of feelings for men.
No, thank you. You know, human species for tens of thousands of years, our feelings are what informed us. Obviously, we didn't have the internet. We didn't have the information age. Our feelings told us how the weather was going to change. Our feelings told us where there was water, where there was danger, where there was food, and many, many, many other things. Our feelings are a wonderful and essential source of informing us as to what's going on. Unfortunately, we live in a culture that doesn't support that anymore. We don't listen to our feelings for what's going on. We turn to our cell phone or our devices to find out what's going on. And especially for men, men are taught at the earliest age not to have uncomfortable feelings. You know, boys don't cry. And in talking to men, and obviously I've worked with thousands of men over the years, I taught in the prison system for a long time. And almost every man has some traumatic story, usually when they were 7 or 8 years old and something happened and they cried for the last time because they got hit by the ball on the playground and they cried and they were shamed. Or something happened, they fell down and they skinned their knee and their father shamed them. And they were taught, don't cry. And they watched what happened to other boys that cried who would be seriously shamed. And so it started with don't crying, but then our culture trains us actually not to have any uncomfortable feelings, not to be sad or confused or overwhelmed. But anger is usually okay. Anger then becomes the cover emotion. Now, this isn't true for everybody. Obviously, there are some cultures, some families where anger is bad, and you're taught that anger is bad. The truth is, there's no such thing as a bad emotion. There's no such thing as a negative feeling. Those are misnomers. There's uncomfortable feelings. And uncomfortable feelings are part of life. And learning how to work with our uncomfortable feelings is essential. But when we stuff and we stuff and we stuff, then there's explosions. And I want to say right now, more than ever, I'm coaching a lot of clients where what were good relationships are falling apart. I'm coaching people that had never had physical or domestic violence in their relationship. They never thought they would, and now that's happening. And it's not just men hitting women or being physical with women. It's women being physical with their men. Because the pressure of the pandemic, the pressure of economic uncertainty, the pressure of a lot of things going on in the world, that pressure creates greater cracks and greater fissures where, it might be a small crack, it becomes a bigger crack. It might be a big crack, and it becomes a really big crack. And coming back to men and feelings, men have to learn how to manage their feelings, how to notice their anger or their agitation or their fear or their sadness. Because if any human being, especially a man, just stuffs it, if it stays stuffed, it becomes cancerous or a stroke or a heart attack. The other thing that often happens is then it will explode in a completely unmanageable way, which then reinforces the idea that, there's something wrong with me.
Oh.
And the last thing I'll say, and then love your feedback, almost all of us have I am not fill in the blank enough. I'm not good enough. I'm not smart enough. I'm not rich enough. I'm too old. I'm too young. I'm too fat. I'm too thin. Most of us have all something like that. And so our wounding, our insecurity gets masked. And we sometimes go to great lengths to mask our wounding, our insecurity, or our fears. But true friendship and healthy, mature love is being able to share our insecurities, our vulnerabilities, our fears, and to be able to share it and be heard and listened to and accepted. Because I'll tell you what I learned, especially working in the prison system. Everyone wants to be cared for. Now, there might be big, big, big walls depending on, how much lack of care someone has received. But I worked with serious, serious felons, guys that had terrible things done to them and had done terrible things in the world. And with enough empathy, with enough understanding, every single one of those guys cracked. And by cracked, I mean I was able to get through to the being that just wanted to be loved, just wanted to be respected, just wanted to be cared for. We all want to be cared for. And we especially want to be cared for when we allow ourselves to acknowledge our uncomfortable feelings, our fears, our insecurities. So a strong, healthy, balanced man knows how to acknowledge his uncomfortable feelings, not label them as bad or negative, and recognize that all uncomfortable feelings are pointing to our unmet needs. Right? I'm angry because my need for respect wasn't met. I'm frustrated because my need to be understood isn't happening. Right? So if we can learn that our uncomfortable feelings are pointing to something very important, which are always our precious values or needs, you can call those are synonymous ways of referencing what's really motivating us at all times. So that's kind of my opening thought about that.
No, that's really nice to hear, and that's something else we have in common, Scott. Because I too, when I first, in early recovery, because I'm in recovery, I too worked in the lifers prison, and worked with a lot of inmates who did some horrible things, right? But you're so right, because they just want to be heard. I think being non-judgmental, not being judged, and I think it's very easy to say I'm non-judgmental. I think we all have a bit of judgment of some kind, but I'm trying, as life goes on, to be as less judgmental as possible. And I think in the field that I'm in, mental health, drug and alcohol, the field, I think it's important to at least show compassion, and we'll come back to your compassionate communication afterwards, because there's a lot of things I want to talk to you about that. But I think they were surprised and pleasantly surprised, the felons, that they were, for the first time, maybe someone was hearing them. Someone was taking time to listen to them, taking time to talk to them, regardless of the reason that they were inside for. And we're talking murderers, sex offenders, armed robbers, drug traffickers. So some bad crimes that were done. But I wasn't there to talk about their crimes. I was there to help them with their drug and alcohol addiction, and to try and play a part in stopping them reoffend when they do finally get released. And if I could make a difference in helping them and potentially stopping them reoffending, then that's what got me through doing the job as well. So thank you for that, and I too share that experience that you probably had in the prison service
Yeah.
with men in particular. I want to go back a few years, you growing up, and a bit about your life and how relevant it is for what kind of work you do today, and how you got to where you got to, and you're a multi-award Emmy winner. I think there's a film you called Men in Love. Is that one of yours? Yes, I
Yeah,
want to talk a
I
bit
wrote
about that,
that
and
movie.
it's just tell me a bit about the first, say, 20 years of your life, whatever,
Sure.
as
Well,
much as you want.
so the funny part, when I tell this story is I was literally born on Christmas Day, truly,
Wow.
and I grew up with a Messiah complex. I was this really intense little kid because I thought it was up to me to save the world. And
Wow.
Saf, by the time I hit 10 years old, I was freaking out because I was just kind of old enough to begin to comprehend how big the world was and how little I was. Fortunately, as time went by, I realized it wasn't up to me. It was up to all of us. But there was always this drive to make the world a better place, which clearly you have, and Debbie, and probably just about everybody watching this show. When I'm teaching my classes, workshops, I say, how many of you have really had this like inner drive, like I'm here to make the world a better place? Almost everybody raises their hand, right? So, yeah. So I kind of figured early on, because I was born and raised in a suburb of Los Angeles, so I was, near Hollywood. You got to do it through the entertainment industry. So at a very early age, I started producing educational programming, first for teenagers, because I was a teenager. And so I was producing shows for teenagers, by teenagers, about teenagers. And that company really took off. And by the time I was 21, I had 85 full-time employees. We started producing television shows for teenagers, and that's what I won my Emmy Awards for. And I won my first Emmy at 23, another one at 25, and another one at 27. So I was blessed. I got off to an early start. It was kind of fast. And I started a camp at Jane Fonda's ranch in Santa Barbara. This was when Jane Fonda was the #1 female box office star in the world. And so it was great because the camp was a way that we, as I got older and my artistic staff got older, we could stay connected to teenagers. And we did 5 camp sessions up at a ranch, and she'd bring up different celebrities. And so it was cool kind of meeting celebrities, but meeting them, as human beings. And actually it was interesting because they were like more interested in what we were doing at the camp. So I was kind of like, I'll never forget, answering Paul Newman's questions or Cher's questions. They were like wanting to learn from me about, wow, the camp. And Paul Newman actually started his own camp, somewhat inspired by what we were doing. So it's kind of a cool, experience. And really the coolest thing was about half the kids we brought up were inner city ghetto kids. And the other half were like kids connected to Jane and her husband at the time, Tom Hayden. So we had movie star kids. Angelina Jolie was one of our campers. Because none of us were like, oh, wow, that's Angelina Jolie, because she was just a kid. It was like, wow, that's John Voight's daughter, right? And so there was this interesting mix of movie star kids and activist parents' kids, because Tom and Jane were very activists, and inner city ghetto kids, and this watching the integration. And the beautiful thing that we saw was that no matter what any of those kids' past was, if we created an environment where they could express themselves and police themselves and be self-responsible, 98% of those kids thrived. Sadly, there would be 1 or 2 kids per session that just were too stuck in a destructive trip. And for the first couple of years, we'd try to reform those kids, and then we learned, no, you have to just ship them back down the hill, which was sad. But 98% of those kids would adapt. They would go from being predatory or tough shit into like, oh, the game we're playing here is this kind of rainbow, flower child, peace, love game. And they were like so relieved to be able to drop the trip and relate to each other in that way. And it it really inspired the work that I do now in many ways, because I saw that, again, like we already said, we all want to be loved. We all want to be cared for. We all want an opportunity to be seen and cherished. And so when I started the Love Coach Academy, the idea is that in traditional therapy, and God bless traditional therapists, they spent many years learning how to diagnose and evaluate what's wrong with you and what's wrong with me and what's wrong with their clients. And there's value there. In love coaching, we're not interested in what's wrong with someone. We're here to help people remember their divinity and absolutely how magnificent they are. And that any challenges they're having, any behavior, habits, addictions that they have are coping mechanisms to the very real challenges of being a spiritual being, having a human experience, being in an animal body. Of course, we don't condone hurtful behavior. We don't support, we don't do a spiritual bypass of, oh, well, it's okay. I mean, of course, there are choices we make that have consequences. But by remembering the divinity and focusing on the divinity, and then in working in relationships, when I'm working with a couple that are challenged, I don't start with, so what did he do to drive you crazy? I start with helping them to remember love, helping them to remember how much they love each other, how much they admire each other, what they respect about each other. I'm all about helping them to remember the connection and drop into that connection, to remember the love. And then on that foundation and staying in that place, we look at, okay, what are the challenges that have come up? Not from a place that either of you are right or wrong or good or bad, certainly not from a judgmental place. But inevitably something happened. You got hurt, person A got hurt, they reacted. Their reaction caused the other person to react. And now instead of two loving, conscious human beings, you've got two reptile brains in reaction to each other, which is unfortunate and uncomfortable. And we don't want to do that. We don't want it to be our reptile brains just in reaction to each other. We want to slow it down, remember love, see the other with compassion. And when we can see each other and ourselves with compassion, that's when the miracles happen in our relationships.
And that's fascinating. But I have it's a bit of a challenge to what you just said in terms of, and I know you're going to come up with a proper answer, as we say in the UK.
I'm excited.
Yeah. And this is my own personal thing. As you may or may not, well, I'm sure you have experienced, especially people in addiction, we cause a lot of destruction.
Sure.
Not just to ourselves, but to everyone around us, really. And I too did cause a lot of destruction, especially to my family. And I caused a lot of hurt. And even though I'm in recovery now and things aren't like that anymore, it's not the same today, I still get reminded about the destruction that I've caused. And then any kind of love for myself sort of goes, Scott. I feel affected by hearing it again. And I know in addiction, we change, we move on, but we can't expect the people that we've affected to change because they don't really have to change. But sometimes, because of the chaos and because of the pain that I've caused my wife in particular, sometimes I get reminded of it. Sometimes something comes up on TV or something happens and it brings it back to me, and I can't seem to move on from that, Scott. And I have a lot of I don't know, it feels like I've done so much in recovery, but that will always be there. How would you so if a client came to you and said that, how would you approach that?
Client, I'm going to work with you. Okay, can I work with you on this directly?
Please do. Yeah, God, it's like a free session, Debs. Yeah, anyway.
Absolutely. So first of all, I want to thank you for the beauty of your care. Okay, and I'm looking at you instead of at the camera. So any guilt that you experience, underneath that guilt is your care. You feel badly that you hurt your wife. You have remorse. And so the positive part of the guilt or the shame, the remorse, is the love underneath it. Okay, congratulations, you're not a sociopath, right? If you're a sociopath, if you had a sociopathic condition, you wouldn't care. But you do care. And this is to anybody, anyone watching. If you've got guilt, don't stay in the guilt, because the guilt triggers the freeze reaction in our reptile brain and puts us into paralysis and stops us from functioning in the world. And the world needs you. The world needs you. Underneath the guilt, you find the beauty of your care. Now, quite often, and I'm guessing this might be the case with you, Saf, people are so committed, I never want to do that again. So I'm going to consistently remember the horrible things I did and what a horrible creature I became so that I'll never do that again. And I can understand that as a strategy. And I'm not knocking it as a strategy. But here's the most important thing I'm going to say to you and to you. Differentiate between your behavior and who you are as a being. Anything terrible you have ever done, any horrible choice, painful choice any of you have ever made or that I've made, there were choices, there were habits, there were behaviors. It's not who we are. There's no such thing as a bitch. There's bitchy behavior. There's no such thing as an asshole. But there might be times that someone acts in a way that has hurtful consequences. And so let's never dehumanize a human being by labeling them as a bitch or an asshole. Or perhaps, and this might be controversial, even labeling them as that addict. Do you have a compulsion that needs to be managed? Absolutely. All of us do. For some people, it's a compulsion to vanilla ice cream at the end of the night. Other people, it's a compulsion towards more dangerous choices. We have to manage our compulsions. We have to manage our addictions. But let's not label anyone, including ourselves. Let's recognize and remember that we are all spiritual beings having a human experience. We're in animal bodies, and we make choices that are hurtful, and we need to take responsibility for the consequences of those choices. And we do that most effectively by remembering our inherent goodness. When I was working in the prison system, I read a fascinating study. They did a massive 2-year psychological study of 20,000 career criminals. And you know what they found the biggest commonality was? When they were growing up, they were taught that they were bad. Oh, that's who I am. I'm bad. And so they spend their lives being bad. What if we didn't do that? What if we helped people remember their inherent goodness? Instead of punishment, we help people remember their beautiful virtues and their beautiful qualities. There's a tribe in Africa that does that, by the way, and there are almost no violence. So, Saf, remember the beauty of your being. And if you're having a guilt memory, a shame memory, thank you for your care. Thank you for your dedication to learning from that experience. But that's not a reflection of who you are. Who you are is this beautiful man having a challenging human experience like all of us, who's dedicated to learning how to love your wife and yourself and others as best as you can.
I've got tears of gratitude at the moment, Scott. I really have. And the way you talk and the tone of your voice is just so, it's so endearing, and it's so it's so relaxing, and you've got something about you. You've got the Messiah look, Messiah like.
Yeah, I'm kind of going for the Messiah look.
You've got it. It's and in Arabic we say Messiah. There's a Netflix series called Messiah. I think you might enjoy it. I don't know if you've seen it or if you watch Netflix. But thank you very much for that. And you know what? I actually feel better. I feel better for hearing that, because you know, if someone feels something like that, they're feeling it because they're not a bad person, right? Even though they may have done bad things, they're feeling it because they actually do genuinely care. Um, and as I don't know if you know Dr. John D. Martini, he always says there's no prey without a predator, there's no predator without a prey, and you've got to bring it to a level. And that's what you've more or less said in a different. Beautiful. Thank you very much. Thank you, Scott, and grateful to hear that. Grateful. Just send me the invoice, Scott. I think Debs knows where I live, or maybe not. But anyway,
No price. Share the
share the
video.
love.
Yeah,
Share the love. That's what I like.
and remind people to differentiate between the being and their behavior. You know, I learned this from Marshall Rosenberg, and I know we'll talk about Marshall. And for any of you watching, I mean, just introduction, Marshall Rosenberg was the founder of nonviolent communication, also known as compassionate communication.
Well,
And
why don't you tell us this story and then go on to Marshall? We could go straight on to that if you want.
sure, well, what
Yeah.
happened? Yeah, so about 20 years ago, I had my own production company. I was running around making TV shows and videos and even a movie. And I was hired by the Center for Nonviolent Communication to do a series of videos and a television show with Marshall Rosenberg, who was the guy. He was the guy who made it all happen and created it. And it was an amazing experience because if you want to learn something, make television shows and videos about it, right? You got to really understand it. And so what happened was, in order to kind of really get who he was, he had a 3-week tour starting in Southern California and heading all the way up the coast, about 800 miles, well, no more than that, actually, probably more like 1,200 miles, all the way up to Seattle. And I traveled with him for 3 weeks. And we stayed in hotel rooms together, and I had my camera, video camera, and I was filming him and watching him in all these different places, watching him working in the prison system, watching him working with couples, watching him working with educators, watching him teaching other nonviolent communication leaders. You know, it was this whole tour that he was doing that I traveled and followed him on. And what blew me away was, oh my God, no matter who he was talking to, what level of society, culture, everyone was getting something out of it. And my Messiah complex got triggered like, oh, wow, if you want to change the world, we have to change our relationships. Now, I want to say I really appreciate activists. I appreciate how difficult it is. I appreciate people who go into politics. But very few of us really make a significant difference in terms of global politics, really. But we all can make a huge difference every day by how we treat ourselves and how we treat each other and how we treat the people in our universe and our world. So I have really adopted the attitude that if you really want to change the world, change how you relate to yourself, change how you relate to others, and practice, develop, or cultivate some form of a spiritual practice. Not necessarily religion. A spiritual practice can be yoga, a martial art form, a musical instrument, time in nature, meditation, or a religious practice. But really cultivating healthy, conscious relationship to self, to source, call it God, call it Jesus, call it higher self or higher power, and to each other. The people I know that do that are the people I know that are the happiest and are contributing to the world in really valuable ways. And Marshall is who kind of set me on that track. And so, kind of coming back to what we were talking about, he taught me about enemy images. Right? When during World War II, British soldiers were not sent back over to Germany to kill Hans, Jürgen, or Peter. No, you went to kill the dirty Nazis. Currently, American soldiers that fly drones and drop bombs, they aren't told, okay, now you're going to be killing Abdul and Rasuli and Mohammed and his wife and children. No, you're dropping bombs on the evil terrorists. I use that analogy Because in order to hurt someone and certainly to kill someone, we have to dehumanize them. So we create an enemy image. But again, anytime we think to ourselves, God, I'm such an idiot, or oh, he's such a jerk, or she's such a bitch, we are assigning an enemy image to another human being. We are dehumanizing them. And that's a horrible act of violence. And most of us don't see ourselves as violent anymore because we don't throw punches. Most of us don't throw punches. Certainly almost all the people watching my shows, your shows, don't throw punches. But what an asshole. I'm a jerk. That's an act of violence. It's a punch. So how do we manage that? We slow down. You know, you talked about you try not to be judgmental. Hey, I still have judgmental thoughts all the time. Judgment, and Marshall talked about it. They said, look, the judgmental thoughts don't stop. But we notice, oh, there I go. I'm having a judgmental thought. And judgmental thoughts, by the way, can be compliments. Wow, she's really hot. Wow, he's a really good looking guy. They're still judgmental thoughts, right? So underneath all judgmental thoughts is our relationship to our values. Even, wow, she's really hot. Well, she's meeting our need for beauty, right? Or, oh my God, that's disgusting. Well, it's not meeting our value for safety or harmony. Right? So learning how to recognize that underneath all of our judgmental thoughts are our feelings, of course, and then our values. Which of my values? So if you're judging yourself or judging another person, don't stay stuck on the judgment. Which of your values are really up? Right? I'm not going to make a political statement, but it's a good one to use. I think most people, even Trump supporters, would acknowledge that he is quite dishonest. So we can go crazy over hating Trump, or we can recognize, wow, he just doesn't meet my value for honesty or consideration or respect. And bring it back to the values that that person triggers within you. Because if we stay focused on Trump, you have no impact on Donald Trump. None, zero, zip. He doesn't know you exist. But if you recognize that what's really alive for me is how much I value honesty, how much I long for honesty from a leader, right? That is a value to know about yourself.
What about when it's? I mean, again, I didn't want to talk about politics, but like there's politicians in the world, there's prime ministers around the world who are indirectly killing people.
Mm-hmm.
How would you deal with that emotion of hate, of anger?
Yeah, don't hate, mourn. Mourn. Feel the horrific sadness. You know, America just went through this with George Floyd because it was such a long, slow murder. I think many Americans in the past, when there's been, you know, a white cop shoots a black person, it's like, oh God, that sucks. But there was kind of like well, the cop got scared, he pulled a trigger, it's easy to pull the trigger. But we watched this officer with his knee and all his body weight on another human being's neck for 8 minutes and 45 seconds, while bystanders were saying, help him, get off his neck. People begging for this guy, and 3 other cops just standing there watching. It's not going to be useful to hate those 4 policemen or that cop. That's not useful. Cry. Just thinking about it makes me cry. The horror of that. Mourn. Mourn. And then bring it back to yourself. What are the little things I do where I put my knee on the neck of someone I have power over? So someone in my life, a child, if you have a business, are the places where I have power and I use that power in a way that hurts another human being in order to have more respect for myself, to make myself look good. Bring it back to ourselves. That's how we change the world, is by changing ourselves.
Steve, thank you for that. I want to go back to Marshall Rosenberg, and I heard a story not so long ago. I think it was a tribute that you were doing to Marshall. It was a non-violent communication, non-violent conference or something. I don't know where you were, but you were talking about compassionate communication, non-violent communication. But you said this story about Marshall Rosenberg when he was a young lad, and then when he grew up, and what happened. And
Do you want
this
to tell?
story,
Shall I tell
yeah,
it? Yeah.
please. This story touched me in so many ways.
So shortly after when I was traveling with Marshall during those 3 weeks, he told me this story. And it just happened. So to understand the context, when Marshall was a boy, around 10 years old, he had an experience that changed his life and set him on his life's journey. And what happened was he grew up in Cleveland, and it was a rough time, and he was Jewish, Marshall Rosenberg. He and his father went out to eat. They were eating in a coffee shop, and a group of adult men started to harass them because they were Jewish. And the father didn't pay attention, tried to ignore it, paid the bill. And as they were walking to the car, this group of adult men proceeded to beat up Marshall's father in front of Marshall, just because his father was Jewish. And imagine the horror of being a boy watching your beautiful father get beat up. It's just a horrible experience because he was Jewish, and I'm Jewish. Meaning Marshall was Jewish. What is that? And it set Marshall on this path of wanting to understand human nature and how human beings could do that, and to shift from painful judgment into compassion. Fast forward about 45 years, and Marshall's now traveling the world teaching compassionate communication. And he's been invited to a refugee camp in Israeli-occupied Palestine. And it's a pretty funky situation. It's really hot. There's fences, there's Israeli soldiers with machine guns. And although these people aren't prisoners, they're refugees that are not allowed to go to their own homes or their own places of business, or they've been disrooted. So it's a really funky scene. And they brought him in to teach compassionate communication, right? And you can imagine, right, all these Palestinians herded into a hot tent, to listen to a Jew tell them how they should be nonviolent in their communication. Well, it's not going well at all. The Marshall's making his presentation, they're not really paying attention, and then the heckling begins. And there's this one heckler who starts really throwing out pretty vicious words at Marshall. And Marshall tries to ignore him, very much like his father, tries to ignore him, and this guy starts getting more violent in the heckling. And Marshall sees the guards on their way to yank this guy out, and Marshall's impulse is, get this guy out of here. And then he has an epiphany. He realizes, oh my God, am I going to just get through my speech as fast as I can and get the hell out of here? Or am I going to try and demonstrate what I'm teaching? Now, the first thing he has to do in that instant is give himself an emergency dose of self-empathy, because he's scared. He's scared, right? He's triggered. His reptile brain is going on. It's like, it's a scary story. What if these people mob me? What are they going to hurt me, right? So he has to give himself that empathy. Yes, I'm scared. And can my care for these people, can my care even for the heckler supersede my fear? That's a beautiful question to ask yourself. When your husband, your wife, your kids, your people in your world are doing something that bothers you, can my care for my wife, can my love for my children, for my care for this other human being supersede my fear or my hurt? And if the answer is yes, stay and give empathy. And you know what? If the answer is no, it's okay. That just means you're not resourced enough and you need to exit the situation and take care of yourself. In this particular case, Marshall summoned the courage, the strength to proceed. And he said to the heckler, first he calls off the guards and he says, no, please, I want to hear what this gentleman has to say. Whoa, now that's a pattern disrupt. That got the audience's attention. He's getting heckled. And Marshall says, I want to hear what this gentleman has to say. So step one, self-empathy. Step two, pattern disrupt. Treat the other person with respect, even if they're being disrespectful. Step three, though, he then says, sir, I can hear you much more effectively if you please stop offending me. I do want to hear what you have to say. Sets a boundary with compassion and lets him know, I can hear. The man wants to be heard. I can hear you more effectively if you stop offending me. Well, the guy, the heckler at this point is still super jacked up, so he's still pretty strong, saying, have you seen what your country does, how America supports Israel, and we're in a prison camp here, and I have a wife, I have children, and I can't even go to my own home, I can't take care of them the way I want to, and he goes on and on about how horrible America is, how horrible Israel is, but Marshall doesn't go into defending America, doesn't go into defending Israel, he doesn't go there, he doesn't go into that bait. But he hears, I have a wife, I have children, and I want to take better care of them. The precious values underneath the anger, underneath the rage. And so Marshall goes there. Wow, I really hear that you want to take better care of your wife, your children. You don't want to have to be in this environment, which is so difficult. You want to be back home. You want to be feeding them. You want to be taking good care of them. Yes, exactly. Is Marshall's understanding. They continue the dialogue. Marshall dialogues with other people, just giving empathy, just understanding, not defending himself, not defending America, just giving empathy. At the end of this presentation, the same heckler invites Marshall to a makeshift Ramadan dinner in his tent with his family. And he went on to become a nonviolent communication practitioner and teacher.
Wow. Wow.
I've told that story 100 times and it still tears me up. And just the last thing I want to say is, look, all of us are going to be in situations where someone is saying something really hurtful. They're behaving in a way that scares us, that freaks us out. Our reptile brains, go nuts. But if we can slow down and try and understand what underneath are they longing for? What is the precious longing? And you know what? Most of the time, they just want to be heard. They want to be understood. The way they're communicating, the tone of their voice, the words might be hurtful and offensive and hard to hear. But if we can just drop into the beauty of their desire to be cared for, the desire to be heard, the desire to be understood. That's the meaning of this story.
And it's Marshall's no longer with us, is he?
No, Marshall passed about 5 years ago.
What a great man he sounds like, and what a situation to be in. Wow, I mean, and it's and in one way you can understand the anger from the Palestinians because of what's been happening, but the way he brought it down, he wasn't there about. It wasn't a war thing for him. It was a thing about, it was about he heard what this man really wanted.
Yeah.
And because the man, for God knows how long, someone was hearing him.
Yeah.
Was hearing him, not judging him, not treating him like whatever he was treated in the past by the soldiers or whatever, and hence he invited him to break fast with his family, which is It's just beautiful. It really is beautiful.
And just realizing the connection for you from your heritage, how that story probably has a little extra meaning for you as well.
Well, it does. It does. I mean, I was brought up in an Islamic household, so I have a lot of knowledge about the Islam faith, and I have a lot of time for the Islam faith, like I have a lot of time for all faiths. And I'm sad. I'm sad at what's happening in the world, not just in Palestine, but in Syria, in Yemen, in Africa. What's happening in America? What's happening all over? It's so sad. And just like yourself, I would love to do something to stop it, but it's not possible. And we can only do what we can do. And I know people as well who've suffered in Palestine as well, and that story is just remarkable because, and it's again you and I going in the prison service. It's someone going, and they're expecting that we're going to be a certain way because that's what they're used to, and all of a sudden we're not, and that's endearing to them, and that's what brings them, and then we can work together in whatever way. It's all about compassion. It's all about transforming the relationships that what they perceive is going to be. And our last point, because I wish we had more time, I want to talk about your 12 adjustments to transform our relationships. And I don't want to give too much away because people need to come and see you and work with you personally, you, Debs, and everyone with Love Coach Academy. But just briefly, could you tell us a bit about the 12 adjustments that you have to transform our relationship?
And I'll be happy to come back and do a show just on the adjustments with you. So I'll be happy to do that. You've heard me talk a few times already about how when we do things that we regret or are regrettable, it's a choice, and often it's a habit. You talk about when you were dealing with addiction, right? Well, addiction is a habit. It's become a behavior, right? And so, in order to change, what we need to do is recognize, okay, what are my habits, and what are the habits? We'll take a specific habit that I have that the hurtful consequences are far outweighing the positives. Yes, getting high, I'm having a fun time for the evening, but the next morning I'm hungover. My wife is worried about me not functioning effectively in my job, right? All these negatives, really outweigh a fun night getting high, right? As an example. So the 12 adjustments is 12 different things that we do that create separation in our relationship. One example is criticism. So going from being critical to appreciative. When we criticize another person, they go into a defensive posture, reptile brain takes over, it creates separation. When we are in appreciation of a person, they move towards us. The little receptor cells get all happy and they open. Another example is instead of blaming someone, being curious. So I always like to give an example of the same words, but notice how different it is between, why did you do that? A very kind of prosecutorial questioning versus, wow, why'd you do that? I want to know. I want to understand you, right? It's like if we approach something with an energy of blame, shame, judgment, criticism, make wrong, create separation. But if we can approach it with appreciation, seeking to understand, curiosity, acceptance, compassion. So the 12 adjustments are kind of like the 12 things we do that create separation. They're habits. They're not who we are. They're not how we really want to be. They're just habits we picked up. Think about an infant. An infant is like this brand new being. Infants don't judge. Infants don't run shame. They don't look at you and go, whoa, Dad, man, I wanted a blonde, right? They don't do that. They can have crap coming out of their 3 orifices at once. They have no shame. They can keep you awake all night long. They have no shame or guilt about that, right? They're just like in the moment. They learn shame. We learn shame. We learn to judge. We learn guilt. We learn these things. They're not who we are. They're habits we've picked up that we want to change. The 12 adjustments helps people to come up with alternatives to the life alienating or hurtful habits and to cultivate life affirming, loving habits.
Thank you, Scott. This has been such an honor, and I just feel relaxed just being with you and hearing you. I could have a, you know what? Do you ever do meditation? I'm sure you do. That's a silly question. Of course you do. But if you had a tape, if I had your voice as a guided meditation, and I hope you haven't. If you haven't done one, you need to do one, because I would listen to that all day long, and I'm sure many people would.
I will send you one of my meditation tapes.
Do you really have?
Yeah. Give me your email address and I'll email you one.
Oh God!
Yeah.
Wow! Oh, that's amazing. But on top of that, your wisdom, your knowledge, your compassion, you come from a place of love, which is something that I'm always strong on, and I thank you. I thank you for being here on my show on inspirational people, inspirational stories, because you definitely are an inspiration, and continue the good work that you're doing. And I know through Debs, I know we're gonna do some work together. I know we are, because that's why we're here. We're here, we have the same vision, we have the same. Well, there's a lot of similarities that we have, and I'd like to develop and continue this relationship that I believe that I can have with you and many people out there. So thank you very much, Scott. And yeah, thank you guys. This has been Inspirational People, Inspirational Stories. Today we've had Scott Catamas. Next week we've got Great Britain female finalist, Miss Great Britain finalist 2020, and she's got a story of abandonment when she was a child. I don't want to say too much, and she's doing some great things in the world, just like yourself, Scott, and she's going to be an incredible guest. So that's next week, but thank you for joining us. I am Saf Surgery. I am Saf Buxy. Collaboration with Love Culture Academy, baby. Spiritually Gone Wild. I'm a big supporter of his men's mental health charity, Aspire to Be Recovery Community, a charity dedicated to addiction and trauma. You've been great, Scott. And spiritual love, over to you. Thank you very much. Take it away, Debs.
Are your relationships driving you crazy? Are you experiencing rough challenges with family? Miscommunication with your friends? Upsets with the people you work with? What about your romantic love? Is the tension too much? Are you single and missing love? Are you feeling lonely and wanting understanding? Are there threats to break up? Is there too much pain? Does any of this sound familiar? There is hope. There are solutions. There are simple and effective communication tools. Experience compassionate connections. Bring happiness back to the family. Don't suffer any longer. Learn simple tools that work to transform relationships. We are happiest when our relationships are thriving. We've helped thousands of individuals, couples, and families back into harmony. Learn more at lovecoachacademy.com.